Hollywood, you can see lots and lots of movies from the 40s and even into the 50s of glamorous resistance agents. It seems like there were resistance movements in every country in Europe except in Germany. And, as a result, the German people have gotten a very bad rap. The assumption is that they were all evil, vicious, wicked, and evil people. But in fact, there were a lot of resistance movements in Germany, but they tended to be led by aristocratic families. And so our country wouldn't deal with them. Do you have to elaborate on that?
Well, have you read chapter 10, Connie? Okay. Chapter 10 is my German chapter. And I'm glad you brought this up. This is actually where the point I made earlier, where I said the war could have possibly ended sooner had it not been for the communist penetration of our agencies and our departments. And here's actually how it worked. Yes, there was, and this was totally new to me, there was indeed a very significant anti-Nazi German resistance. And there was much of it that was aristocratic. It was also military. The chief of intelligence, Admiral Canaris, was also part of this and certainly sheltered the men who under him who were more active in it. He actually was named a righteous Gentile in 2009 for having saved Jews from at one point in Poland. So this is not a figment of anyone's imagination. I actually go through a number of different groups and different points of American contact. There were sincere efforts made to reach out to America and Britain, this was both of us, by these Germans who offered Hitler and the Nazi command, the hierarchy, in exchange, always in exchange for helping keeping Stalin out of the East. So this was an anti-communist, anti-Nazi resistance. It got nowhere in Washington, D.C. because of the communist infiltration. I'll give you one example. In 1942, the American Berlin bureau chief of the AP, a man named Louis Lochner, came back home with secret messages. It was from a mutual friend. It was Prince Louis Ferdinand, a crown prince, as I recall, of Germany at the time, or in that family, who wanted to make contact with Roosevelt, his friend. They'd actually been social friends. Lochner was a friend of him, too. They were mutual friends. He wanted to contact Roosevelt, set up a secret way of a channel of communication. He had suggestions for Roosevelt to give speeches and discuss post-Hitler Germany, what it should look like. He thought this, and they had all kinds of plans. Lochner could not get into the White House. And he tried many times, and he was actually told at a certain point, even a phone call went to the AP bureau here, basically saying, it's getting embarrassing. Please tell your correspondent to stop calling. I mean, it was kind of an amazing statement. This comes out of Lochner's memoir, which was, I found, quoted in a book that came out about 1969 in Germany, I'm reading English, of course, about the German resistance. And I'm thinking, gosh, that's so, I mean, it's horrifying, but it's also very fascinating. Just think, what was the mechanism for that turndown that stopped this particular vector of hope, perhaps? And I look in a footnote, and this is 1969. It's pre all these Venona archives and Russian archives and all this stuff. It's pre all that release. The name of the man who is footnoted as having made that phone call was Lachlan Curry, a Soviet agent working in the White House. So here is where you actually can trace what happened. We had other situations where there was one of Roosevelt's emissaries was a man, one of my truth tellers, I call him, George Earle, who had been a New Deal governor, friend of Roosevelt's, very swashbuckling kind of guy that Roosevelt sent off to Europe during the war. And he was making contact with Canaris, then later with von Papen, another one of these Germans, and had all these plans and these writing cable. He was writing letters, I guess, back through the diplomatic pouch to the White House. Because when he left as Roosevelt's emissary, he actually wrote a letter, which I quote in the book. I found it at Georgetown University archives of Harry Hopkins' papers, where he says, Dear Harry, you know how the how the big boss thinks, and I'm going to leave it up to you to decide what's important and what's not to give to Roosevelt while I'm away. As words to that effect. Anyway, so you know that Hopkins is a channel there. Well, all of Earl's attempts were stopped, blocked. He talked about it in Congress at a certain point. Well, I was writing right to the President and Harry Hopkins. Well, you can imagine where this goes. But what we do know is that there was great importance attached to the notion of suppressing any concept of a German resistance, because we were bombing them into obliteration, and you needed the notions of collective guilt. You could not allow that out. After the war ends in Europe in May of 1945, Eisenhower actually gives a greeting to all the resistance groups of Europe, but he doesn't mention the Germans. You find this time and time again. And I would venture that most of us, unless you're very, great researchers or specialists, have not heard about this particular resistance. Maybe you've seen the Tom Cruise movie Valkyrie, which I'm sure to some Americans must have seemed like science fiction, because it just doesn't resonate. That's not what we were taught. But I think you'll find that interesting. I do go through a number of these attempts, because there were quite a few.